Three, two, one. We're live. Hello, Sarah. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
And yeah, please, can you tell us where we are right now?
Yeah, we are at the People's Circle for Palestine, the UofT encampment. It is day 30. Thank you so much for coming out here and for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
This is a very special place. I've arrived early to really check out the location. I came personally before to really interact with everyone here. Can you tell me a little bit about why you guys are doing this here?
Right. So this is a protest. National and international law. UofT has a legal obligation to not be complicit in war crimes, and they still are. Their investments are still, are still complicit in an ongoing genocide and in war crimes. And so we, as students, have been pushed to protest them and to apply pressure so that there can be an end to the complicity.
When you say war crime, what are specifically, for a lot of people that are not noticed, what are the war crime that the Occupy UofT has been accusing UofT of these days?
Yeah, totally. So UofT invests in weapons manufacturing companies that are complicit in the ongoing genocide in Palestine. And so, we as Occupy UofT, we as protesters, we as campers are pushing for neutrality. Divestment is neutrality. And we are telling UofT, divest your money out of weapons manufacturing companies so that your investments are not aligned with the interests of just one side, of the Israeli apartheid state.
Wow, so they have been doing these investments for a long period of time
Yeah,
since.
for Yeah, for a very long time, and it's our tuition money that is invested into these weapons manufacturing companies. Why is tuition money? Why is money being invested in weapons manufacturers in the first place? And so it is the first time. It's pretty historic that we're discussing slash negotiating divestment with them on this item. But yes, it has been happening for way too long.
Yeah, regarding of divestment, I know there's a couple of proposals that you guys laid out. I checked out your Instagram. Do you mind relaying that to the audience for one more time?
Yeah, I'd love to
Yeah.
go like item by item in terms of
Hmm.
our demands.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so the
Hmm.
first is disclosure. And so we want to know where exactly our tuition money is being invested. The number two item, so number two is divestment specifically. And so from weapons manufacturing companies that are complicit in the ongoing genocide. And number three, cutting ties with Israeli academic institutions that maintain the occupation and maintain the ongoing genocide and are also complicit in the violence and in the horror and in the genocide in Palestine.
Okay, I think one question is, how would the academic aspect relate to what's going ongoing right now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. So the institutions, for example, the Hebrew University, which UFT has partnerships with, exchange programs with, they are on illegal settlements. Not only that, but they have close relations with the Israeli occupying forces, and so they actively and directly, support the military, which are carrying out these crimes against humanity. Similarly, Technion Institute is another institution that UFT supports and has direct relationships with, where they create artificial intelligence used for things like drones and weapons, which are used to surveil and harass Palestinians on their own land. And so we are saying, cut these ties. It is, against, like you have a legal obligation to cut these ties, and it is maintaining this violence that we are against.
So how long have this been involved? Them being invested with each other?
Yeah,
Yeah.
for a very long time. We are 76 years and 3 weeks late. Palestine has been occupied for a long time. And since the beginning of time, I mean, they have been, building these relations with Israeli institutions and the Israeli state as a whole. And this is the first time that we are actually saying, we've been saying it for a long time. It is the first time that they're negotiating with us and listening to us saying that they must end these relations.
To put it very simply,
Mhm.
you guys are trying to point out the fact that these investment and these beneficiaries exist,
Yeah,
and people are not noticing this. They're
yeah,
using tuition money
yeah,
that often students paid, and we have to pay in
yeah,
this case, and then they're not being transparent about how they spend that money.
yeah.
So
Exactly that.
they have never been that case.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's really, really horrific because the university is quite literally asking its Palestinian students to give their money to these manufacturing companies that kill their family members. At this camp, we have people who have lost hundreds upon hundreds of family members in Gaza. How can they be okay with the fact that their tuition money is complicit in this bloodshed and in these war crimes? It is not fair, and that is what we are protesting.
Is there a way that there has been exposed? There has been like a lot of documents on this aspect?
Yeah, there are publicly available disclosure reports of UFT's asset managers, and we know where their money is going. We know what these investments look like. Of course, that's why the number one item is disclosure. We want to be able to know exactly where the money is going specifically, and for those specifics, we require for them to disclose. And so once we have their full disclosure, we can give them specific targeted recommendations. But we are waiting for them to disclose so that we know the specifics regarding where their money is being invested.
Okay. And do you think that's more like as entity as UFT, or do you think there's more personal influences behind the back that are using the name of UFT to conduct these investments?
Yeah, so UFT definitely has pressure from its donors to maintain these relations with the Israeli state and with the Israeli occupying forces, with these weapons manufacturers. So yes, there's pressure on UFT from individual donors for sure. I think so. But beyond that, I mean, it's just placing profit over people, and that's kind of what we're protesting as well. At the what will you like at the expense of death? Like, will you continue investing in these companies for money at the expense of bloodshed and genocide? And that's the main question here.
Well, yeah, it's like a lot of these we don't know, but these universities are actually for profit.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
totally. It's like a
Hmm.
business. Yeah.
And part of their business is investing in these various academical researches around the world.
Yeah.
So is that type of network they're trying to establish that they have been establishing?
Yeah, and they
Okay.
oftentimes do fall back on this claim of academic freedom,
Okay.
or rather, this commitment to academic freedom. But to that, we say, well, all 12 universities in Gaza have been annihilated and destroyed. There's an ongoing scholasticide, and UFT, your money, your investments are complicit in this. And so, if you cared about academic freedom, your investments would not contribute to the entire educational infrastructure being destroyed and annihilated in Palestine and Gaza specifically. And so, academic freedom is not a good enough reason or justification for these investments. It
Okay.
makes no sense
You
and it's
mentioned
violent.
earlier schisticide?
Yeah, scholasticide.
Scholasticide. I never heard of
Yeah.
that word before. Can you think you can break it down a little? What
Yeah,
does that mean?
totally. So it is specific to Palestine, and it has
Okay.
to do with the entire educational structure being targeted not only by the Israeli state but also by complicity by the West. And so it has to do with scholars and the academic level being a target and being threatening
Mhm.
to the Israeli state.
How is that being targeted? Is that something that's been going on or very
Yeah.
recently?
Yeah, totally. So from the beginnings of the occupation, we have seen educational institutions be targeted. And so right now in Gaza, like I mentioned, all 12 universities have been bombed and annihilated. There are no universities left in Gaza. Libraries have been targeted for a long time, and they're continually targeted. And that is because that is where, that is like culture, and that is like knowledge that is stored in these spaces, which is threatening to the existence of the Israeli state. Palestinian resistance, knowledge, tradition is threatening to the existence of the Israeli state. And so, UFT's complicity in the companies that they invest in, it just shows us that they don't, in fact, care about things like academic freedom, because these weapons manufacturers have contributed to all institutions being bombed. For example, libraries being bombed. Um,
So
yeah.
wow, so they went in. The first thing they did is to break down these academical institutions.
Yeah,
The storage of knowledge, for example, the libraries, the
exactly.
National Library, for example.
Yeah,
So
yeah, exactly
that
that.
does not exist right now currently in Gaza
In Gaza,
anymore.
there are no universities or colleges left. The graduates have no stages left to walk on. And as we see, convocation is coming up here at UFT. That is a reason they want this grass back at King's College Circle. And we asked them, hey, in Gaza, graduates have no universities left. And guess what? Your investments have played a part in that. Your investments have been complicit in the bombing of all 12 universities in Gaza. And so, if you care about academic freedom and your convocation, think about what you have done in terms of your investments being complicit in Gaza's scholasticide.
And that's something that has happened ever since the full-on war have begun since October 7th.
Since October, yes.
Okay. Okay. Wow. And so, okay, let's go back to earlier about talking about the main purpose of the organization being here. And is it all right to address as Occupy UofT, is that the actual
Yeah,
organization's name?
yeah,
Mhm,
totally.
mhm, mhm. And can you break it down even further? We mentioned this one key point about divestment. Are there any
Yes.
other key points that you would like to discuss?
Yeah, so it's important to mention that as Occupy, but also just as students at UofT, we have been protesting for 8+ months. And so we have been doing protests and walkouts and teach-ins and die-ins, and we've been doing everything we can to get the university to listen to us, to negotiate with us. And for 8 months, they have ignored us. They have been absolutely, just not even listening to our calls. And so it took for us to put this encampment together for them to even enter negotiation with us. And that is the impact that this has had. 2 months ago, we actually occupied Simcoe Hall, which is the office of the president of UofT, Mayor Gertler, and that is the first time that we were able to meet him. Israeli students did not have to occupy his office to get a meeting with him, but we did. For 8 months, we were protesting and we were asking him to listen to us and our demands, which are the same demands, and they ignored us. And so it shows that when the people come together and apply pressure, at least we're able to build some movement. At least we're able to achieve a meeting, to negotiate, and for the university to listen to us. Because prior to this, there were no meetings. They weren't listening to us. Um, you know,
When you say listening, what exactly are you looking or do you mean by that aspect?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So again, for 8 months, all we wanted to do was to have a meeting with admin for them to respond to our emails, for them to acknowledge the gravity
Wow.
of the situation at hand, the genocide, the
Mhm,
fact that Palestinian students have lost hundreds upon hundreds of family members.
mhm.
They would not respond to our calls. They would ignore us, and we would be outside Simcoe Hall every single week for 8 months. It is only after we occupied Simcoe Hall that we had our first ever meeting. And in this meeting, President Mayor Gertler, he confirmed to us, he told us that UFT invests in weapons manufacturers. He confirmed it. And then, the second meeting, and we haven't met with President Gertler since, but the second meeting with admin is after we established this encampment. And so that shows us that UFT will only listen to us when we apply pressure, and that is the reason why we are here. They are failing to do what they must do according to international law, and we have been put in this position where now we have to put our lives on hold to push them to do the right thing.
Wow. So they were ghosting you guys completely.
100%.
No
Yeah, they were
email,
ghosting us.
no even meeting. You will walk into the office, they will refuse to see you
Yep. they,
beforehand.
they would ignore us. We have a video literally of a Palestinian student outside Simcoe Hall looking at Simcoe Hall and yelling, telling the institution, hey, my cousin was just murdered in Palestine. Why aren't you listening to us? And we have a video of them pulling their blinds down. And so that's just like an example of how we had been shut out for months on end. But it's important to mention these calls are not 8 months old. Like, people at this university have been calling for divestment and disclosure for decades. But these last 8 months, of course, the genocide, it has really, helped us build momentum and push harder on these calls. But yes, they were ignoring us until now.
So what were they doing when they were ignoring you guys? They were just are they still making any public statement? They were just trying to pretend life is normal?
No public statements, nothing. Yeah, just acting as if there isn't an ongoing genocide and as if their investments have nothing to do with the ongoing genocide, which is them, reproducing violence. Like, they were absolutely in every shape, way, and form ignoring us.
Mhm. Speaking of the genocide, I know a lot of our audience must know what's going on, but definitely not to the depth of someone like your knowledge. Do you mind expanding on that a little about, especially on social media? Just a couple days ago, we've
Yeah,
seen everybody, um, not only a lot of footages that's been sharing,
yeah,
and to really seeing in person in 4K sometimes
yeah,
what's happening in a war zone in that's happening at this moment that's everybody having access to on their social media
yes,
and the awareness campaign that's been building
yeah.
um the post uh all eyes on all eyes on
On
Rafah
Rafah, on
Rafah,
Gaza.
yes,
Totally,
that was
totally.
being shown to everybody.
Yeah.
And can you expand on what's happening over there?
Yeah, it's almost unspeakable. Of course, yes, there is an ongoing genocide, but what does that mean? That means that over 40,000 people have been martyred, have been murdered. And that is just the numbers we know of. There are so many bodies under the rubble. That means that there are students at this university who have lost family members and siblings and friends and cousins, many of whom are my friends over here. I have friends who have lost siblings in Gaza these last few months. It means that Palestinians are once again being displaced. And that goes back to the Nakba. We understand the Nakba or the catastrophe as being one isolated event, but in reality, it is a process. It has to do with how Palestinians are ethnically cleansed, how they are displaced time and time again. And that is, again, like you mentioned, Rafah, that is exactly what has happened. Palestinians have been pushed onto Rafah, and then a safe zone was just bombed a few days ago, where again, there were deaths, where children had to watch their parents being burned alive, where children were burned alive and their heads were cut off. And again, we see this being live streamed on our phones. This is the worst case of famine that we have seen in recent times being live streamed on our phones on a human to human level. We know, like a paper cut, we know how much a paper cut hurts, right? We know how much it hurts to like slice our hand, or like to get hurt a little bit. We are watching people being burned alive. We are watching people become orphans, children losing parents and siblings, just with one bomb. um it is horrific. There is no way for me to even put into words how bad the situation on ground is. They have no food. Their healthcare infrastructure is not able to sustain itself due to the blockade. There are trucks of aid that are not being allowed into Gaza. We have doctors who come here and actually speak to us here at the encampment from Palestine, who speak about the horrors and the atrocity, and the fact that they have witnessed trucks and trucks of aid not being allowed through the border. And so,
Can you expand a little bit on that? So what's been happening?
yeah, so there's
Mhm,
been a lot of aid that has
mhm,
not been allowed in,
mhm.
to Gaza to actually aid the people who are suffering. There are people who are under the rubble, alive or dead, we don't know. The educational infrastructure has been annihilated. The healthcare infrastructure is not able to sustain itself. It is a genocide, and that's what we are witnessing, and is being live streamed on our phones. And so, it's not even a secret. It's something that everybody knows is happening, but we somehow still continue to act as if business, should run as usual.
Wow. So you say when you say help that's not getting in, that mean help from the UN that's being cut off?
Well,
Uh,
from the borders, from Egypt, like
okay,
from all
okay,
over.
okay. So other countries are trying to help what's going on, but that's not getting through.
Yep.
I also heard about. So is Rafah the UN camp that was set up prior to protect?
Yeah, there are camps
Okay,
all over, and there was
okay,
one in Rafah as well, the
okay,
Al
okay,
Mawasi camp.
okay.
Yeah.
And also you mentioned
Yeah.
for someone who's not familiar with this term, can you expand a little bit on it?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's an ongoing process. It wasn't just one event, but of
Okay.
course, it means the catastrophe.
Okay.
It's when Palestinians were displaced, over 80% of them who were displaced. And there are still Palestinians all over the world who don't have, who don't have the ability to go back to Palestine because they were ethnically cleansed. And it is an ongoing process that we see today. The latest genocide in Gaza is being understood and framed as the second Nakba. But of course, it is a process, and it is a part of this ongoing, you know, uh, campaign, to ethnically cleanse Palestinians, because Palestinian identity is threatening to the existence of the Israeli state. And that's what we see happening now live.
When you say the Palestinian identity is a threat to the Israeli state, can you expand a little bit on that?
Right.
Hmm.
So the Israeli state was built upon, it's an occupation, it's like a settler colonial state. And so there were peoples living on this land. Palestinian people have been in Palestine. They were in Palestine, and then they were ethnically cleansed, and they were pushed out of their homes. And for Israel to, build legitimacy, around its existence, it wants to deny this history. And so Palestinian existence is a constant reminder of this history of erasure and violence. And so Palestinian existence then is threatening to the legitimacy of the Israeli state, who want to paint themselves as these leaders in, um, all of these different things in technology and human rights, when in reality their very existence was built upon bloodshed and violence.
So that's the history that they're looking to kind of jump over with. But then things are happening right now. There are protests, both all throughout the world, and
Yeah.
also universities. Something I want to speak about with you is that the very university protests that we see throughout North America, a lot of them has been died down, whether through suppression. Some of them I even see maybe at Brown University, the
Mm,
police brutality that was occurring,
yeah.
and setting up a very limited line where you can only protest in this little box that you're in.
Yeah.
So completely twisting the legislations and the rules that university have when it
Hmm.
comes to protest.
Hmm.
So UFT has been very, I guess very open about that, and the fact that you guys are still doing this, still protesting UFT, makes you guys one of the only organization that's still existing in North America in this protest. Is that something you guys think about? Is that so? What has you guys think about what has led to this? in this
Yeah,
case?
UofT has been quite hostile actually, and we
Okay.
now have on the record that they have tried calling Toronto Police Services on us, and TPS actually denied and said that they would not come and clear us out until and unless they have a court order. And so UofT has now escalated, and instead of negotiating with us in good faith, and instead of approaching the negotiating table to discuss our demands with us, they have put hours and hours into building this injunction. They actually presented over 1,000 pages of court documents and affidavits to us, which we had to go through and delay our meetings with them to go through to basically get rid of us because their convocation is coming up. And this injunction specifically, it's now been scheduled by the court for the 19th or the 20th, but they wanted the police to come clear us out, and the police has stated that they will only clear us out if they have a court order. The court, by pushing the injunction hearing to the 19th or 20th, it shows us that even they agree that this is not a state of emergency and that there is no inherent or immediate health or safety hazard of us being here. But they definitely want us gone, and it shows us that maybe they aren't negotiating to us in the best of faith because why is the number one goal to get rid of us? Why is it not to divest from war crimes? Why is it not to divest from a genocide? Why is that not what concerns them more? Why is our us taking up this space? Why is that more concerning than their Palestinian students who have lost hundreds upon hundreds of family members because of where this institution is investing its money? And so also just their interests need to be um, dissected a little bit. And in this moment where now an injunction is being filed against students, staff, and faculty, I think it's really important to really think about what that means.
What is an injunction that's been filed
Yeah.
right now? So what's been happening in that aspect?
Yeah, totally.
Hmm.
So initially, we got a trespass notice and we were asked to leave. And of course, we did not comply because we are not going to leave until our demands are met. And now an injunction has been filed, which means that UFT wants the court to do their dirty work to call TPS on us. They tried calling TPS on us, the Toronto police, and Toronto police denied. And so it is a court order for the police to come and clear us out, which we know oftentimes ends and leads to police brutality, as we've seen even in Canada and other universities. And so that is what the injunction's purpose is.
But they call it trespassing. You guys are students.
Right.
And so is that something, how are you guys responding to that aspect?
Right.
Mhm.
Private property is being weaponized to deny us our freedom of expression.
Okay.
As students, when UFT says that this is our space, well, we are students, staff, and faculty, and that includes us. This is also Indigenous sovereign land, and we have Indigenous matriarchs here on site with us who have given us permission to be here. And so, also coming back to the trespass notice, Indigenous students have been given a trespass notice. Indigenous protesters who are here with us have been told to leave and get off of what is their land, and so even dissecting what private property means, by an institution that claims to practice decolonization. It's really interesting, and it doesn't align with this front that they oftentimes, try to upkeep
I
related to
see, I see. So in one
decolonization.
hand, they're making these acknowledgement that we acknowledge these indigenous land,
Yeah.
and they're making these statement on paper.
Yep.
But the other hand, what they're doing in practicality, in reaction to this, is very goes against exactly what they're doing.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And I mean, the reason we're here as well, I think just coming back to that, we as students and as staff and as faculty and as community members, we have put our lives on hold to hold UFT accountable to national and international law. UFT has failed to do what it is legally obligated to do. And
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 what
so
is that? Like, what are they legally obligated to do
Right. So we
in
have
this sense?
provisional measures that have said
Okay.
that Canada must end arms sales to Israel, and UFT's investments in weapons manufacturing companies are directly opposed to that call. The ICJ, as well, international and national law wise, the ICJ has also put a call out for an end to the complicity, and so its investments are continuing to fund manufacturing companies that are so directly involved in the ongoing
I see.
genocide.
I see. So UFT invest in the manufacturers
Yeah,
that produces these weapons.
yeah.
And are these manufactured Canadian companies?
Well, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin,
Okay.
these are like two examples.
Mm-hmm.
Hewlett Packard as well.
Mm-hmm.
These are just companies that are complicit in, what's happening.
Okay.
But it's not exclusive to Canadian companies. It's just investments across the board.
I see. I see. So let's go back to the key points, the reasons, the main reasons you guys are here. We have divestment so far, which is talked about various faculties. And oh, by the way, for faculty wise, there's more than just students here. I've
Yeah,
heard.
yeah.
Yes.
We have over 160 faculty members who have been supporting us.
Okay.
We also have the Ontario Federation of Labour, which represents over 1 million workers and 54 unions who have put a statement out and who have said that if the university decides to come in on their students, that they would have to go through the workers first. Faculty for Palestine, right here at UofT, have also said that if the university decides to come in on their students, that they would have to go through faculty first. And so, yes, faculty have been mobilizing in support of the students and in support of this encampment, as have workers and
Hmm.
labor,
Hmm.
across the province and the country as a whole.
Okay. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Wow.
Yeah.
And so majorly, it's the divestment. It's the not transparency of the fact how the cash are being flowed, our tuitions especially,
Yeah.
and the
I mean,
reaction that's been occurring.
totally. So
Mhm.
divestment's pretty central, but so
Mhm.
is disclosure. And so
Mhm.
we don't even know, the extent to like where our investments are going, and we deserve to know. And so we want disclosure as we want to know exactly where the money's going, and then divestment from these companies, and then an end to the academic partnerships and cutting ties.
Is there anything else that you guys are focusing on?
Yeah, I mean, there's a
Uh-huh.
lot more that we discuss
Mhm.
in our negotiations, including
Mhm.
anti-Palestinian racism being recognized
Mhm.
at the
Mhm.
university.
Yes.
That's just one item. There's also another item that we are in conversation with the university about, which is the Institute for Palestine Studies. But that's not what our demands are, and we will leave once our demands are met. And so, while these other items are incredibly important for us to center on and for us to discuss with them, the main reason why we are here is divestment, disclosure, and cutting academic ties with Israeli institutions.
Understand. Speaking of racism, I think that's a subject that we should talk about.
Yeah,
I've heard about the recent Rebel TV, Rebel News
yeah,
incident.
yeah,
Where do you want to elaborate? Do you want to tell the story of what happened and your
yeah.
perspective on that?
Yeah, there's so
Yeah.
many stories with Rebel News if you want to tell me exactly which one you're referring to. But I mean, yeah, they come here and they harass us on the daily almost.
Oh, on a
Um,
daily basis. Oh,
Almost, yeah.
okay,
We've been here
okay.
for 30 days almost.
Mhm,
We are the
mhm.
longest standing encampment in UFT's history. We are the largest encampment in North America. Um, so that does call agitators as well. Yeah, which incident are you referring to specifically? Is it the one where they were just following us with their cameras, or?
There's a couple. I remember this
Yeah.
one time what they did is that they were aggravating a lot of different individuals here.
Oh
Yeah, they
yes.
were aggravating and they're trying to get some clickbaits
Yeah.
and then um just tagging them as some just dismissing them as some individuals, putting labels on these individuals.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
That
Uh,
happens every
mhm,
single day, and not just Rebel
mhm,
News. We have
mhm.
agitators who come here who feel comfortable enough coming here and partaking in anti-Palestinian racism. We have had razor blades be put in food and delivered to us. We have had people come here with knives and tear our banners off of the fencing. We have had people force their way into the encampment, agitators, and sexually harass women inside. And so agitation is something, and harassment is something that we have been dealing with. Even our Jewish campers and protesters over here during Shabbat service, we have people from the outside, like agitators, point at them and quite literally, openly yell out anti-Semitic slurs. And so, anti-Palestinian racism, anti-Semitism, that is something that we have been dealing with, and the University of Toronto has failed to stand up against and to even put a statement out
Mhm.
against.
Right, and then also a lot of attachment. A lot of people want to draw this connotation or a versus or against between
Yeah,
either you're pro-Palestinian or you're anti-Semite. In these situations, but we see that's not really the case
yeah.
because both a lot of these people are just calling out slurs for the sake of it, just to dismiss a person's character.
Yeah, and it's
Hmm.
also anti-Palestinian racism to reduce the Palestinian liberation movement and struggle to being anti-Semitic. This like age-old trope of like the violent Arab man or the violent Palestinian man, to reduce such a legitimate call, such legitimate, genuine demands to being hateful or hate speech. That in and of itself is racist, and it plays into this framing of Palestinian people as violent, as racist, as hateful. That is not what this is about. This is about neutrality. Again, we are holding our institution accountable to being neutral. Divestment is neutrality, and to call this anything else is absolutely wrong and racist. And we have your point about anti-Semitism. We have so many Jewish faculty, staff, and students here. We have the Jewish Faculty Network who have helped us, with programming since day one. Um, and we have governing council members then who call them self-named Jewish people. And so UFT has been, anti-Semitic toward our Jewish comrades who are here, and it is despicable, and we must stand up against it.
Okay, okay. So does that goes in with Zionism? Is that something that you want to elaborate on? For a lot
Yeah.
of our audience, especially audience maybe further away from the conflict, might confuse the difference between what is Zionism is essentially and how is that being used to with the Jewish identity.
Yeah,
Hmm.
so anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. There are many Jewish people who are anti-Zionist, who are against the expansion of the Israeli state as being, like a state that basically ethnically cleanses and pushes out Palestinians. That is built upon the Jewish identity. That is, exclusive to that. And again, how can you tell Jewish people that they themselves who are against Zionism are anti-Semitic? How can you call them like self-hating? That doesn't make sense. It's wrong. And so that differentiation is important.
I see. So that's something that's being rather nationalized
Mhm.
to use as an ideology to either divide, claim legitimacy,
Mhm.
and to execute these orders in these in a more because a lot of times for a lot of soldiers when they're doing I imagine when they're doing these things obviously I heard a lot of different stories about that, but sometimes a soldier might be feel really detached from these situations. I
Mhm.
wonder what these people must be thinking when they're actually doing these things, especially nowadays. You just said drones, rocket, where you just press a button and you don't see exactly what's happening. You have no attachment, sympathy, empathy. None of that is there,
Yeah.
and it must be a very surreal experience. Like I wonder what their reaction is when they actually see and hear what's been happening. Hmm.
Totally. Yeah. I
Hmm.
mean, it comes back to profit being placed over people and us as human beings being divided intentionally and like in a very directive manner, like being divided. And like borders being placed between our communities and these ideologies being put out to divide us further. We have more in common as people, like as human beings, than sometimes we think or we are socialized to think we do. And that is very scary because again, we know what pain feels like. We have the same flesh and blood, and so to think that we as human beings are invoking this harm onto each other, it's a really difficult, thought to grasp.
Definitely, definitely. And speaking of racism, I know there's because it comes so subtly.
Yeah.
Sometimes personally, being Chinese, being Asian,
Yeah.
there's a lot of tension going on between the countries, and sometimes people want to use rather nationalism or people in the West or just a way to disguise their sense of rather false sense of superiority. And they might not be directly calling you names, being the most aggressive version, but those subtleties that comes with
Yeah.
it, we've all experienced. If you're
Totally.
people of color, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, yeah.
Microaggressions. Oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
100%. And the fact that we're like socialized to like be okay with it. And I feel like even internally, like we've internalized these notions of like superiority or like inferiority. Like I don't know about you, but when I first immigrated here, when people would speak to me in a certain way, or when people would make fun of like the South Asian accent, I would almost like give them space to do that. I would like make sense of it, or I wouldn't be as angry as I should have been because we internalize these notions of like, you know, inferiority. And it's really sad to see, but I think that it's good that people are now naming these microaggressions and these forces. And I think naming is the first step in pushing against yeah, like this violence.
Yeah, it's very you speak of first inferiority. I think a lot of people a lot of us, people of color, we're not given the chance, for example, as to understand our identity.
Yeah,
Like for example, the
yeah,
first thing that happened is to bomb our universities. You see what's been happening. Bomb the library, bomb your knowledge, your identity, the things that shape who you are, the
totally.
more spiritual, the more philosophical understanding
Yeah,
when it comes to culture, when it comes to language and history
yeah,
and heritage. And so we're placed in a situation we must have to adapt into a foreign way,
yeah,
and we're being pressured into if we do not act like that.
yeah,
So even it's
yeah.
something like I don't want to specifically say name like Rebel TV because there's a lot of various whether it be individuals, whether it be organizations, outlets that are making fun rather, or
Hmm.
they're echoing a sense of pretending that these things does not exist.
Right.
Like, do you want to address that? Is there something that you want to say to these people?
Yeah, I mean, There's so much that I
Like,
could
first of all,
say.
I don't think they even know what that looks like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right. S
Sometimes it's hard to name like certain experiences. But I also want to like position myself. Like I, for example, over here, I'm an uninvited settler on like Turtle Island. And I think that a lot of the ways that we are assimilated into dominant culture and identities, like it goes into legitimizing the Canadian state. It goes into legitimizing settler interests, and then we, in a way, begin to like also like serve as an extension of these interests and the state. Because again, we're socialized into it. And so yeah, also thinking about how us as immigrants, or like me as an immigrant, how my position, you know, hurts and reproduces harm toward indigenous communities and people over here on this land. We are this like ideal of like the Canadian identity, of like the nice, identity. Like it is something that is so embedded into our consciousness that we also forget that in trying to like uphold these standards, or into like playing into them, how that is also harmful to people who were here before the settler state was established.
Yeah. Very, very it's like sometimes the history goes so long, like, we think 100 years is a long time,
Yeah,
but 100 years ago, the world has been a very different place,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
And
totally,
especially the last 100 years with technology, that's been occurring and especially bringing us these situations.
totally.
And one thing that I wanted to ask you earlier is that when it comes to these aggregation that's been occurring, because I notice a lot of people they come in, these people that we speak of, or just people with alternative interests, they come in, they get things riled up, they get people to speak in a foul language,
Hmm.
to raise some tones, and then they clip it in those situations. You guys encounter these situations
Yeah, like the
now?
media, specifically Rebel
Hmm.
News you mentioned. Yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
we definitely have
Hmm.
people who try to
Hmm.
like, get that one shot, who want to reduce the entire movement or the entire encampment to like, one person or like one wrong thing said, which is also super unfair. But that's why we practice de-escalation in everything that we do here at the camp. And that's why de-escalation is central to how we relate to and engage with anybody who even comes to visit, including media.
What is
Um,
de-escalation?
yeah, and so if we have agitators, who come here to instigate us as protesters, our first response, and something that we have all kind of decided that we would do in response to this, is to de-escalate the situation, to not give the reaction that's we may impulsively want to not fall into these tactics, because of course, framing us as being violent, framing us as being hateful, is exactly what the agitators would want us to do. And so, instead of the situation escalating, trying to like make sure that we step away when needed, and allow folks who know how to mediate the situation to take over, so that we as protesters don't get riled up um, and taken advantage of in that moment.
Right, right. S- So, wow, that's that is something I think everybody should practice, right?
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So it's very nice. I see it's nice out in our security as well. I see the when we came in here, the police told us to don't drive inside.
yeah.
So that's been being blocked. Are these so it goes back to the police are actually trying to help in establishing order in this situation.
I don't know if they're trying to establish order. I think that they have been given instructions from admin, so they have like blocked roadways, things like that. We haven't been involved in those decision making processes. And yes, they have said no to admin in terms of coming in to raid us, but they will do that if the court order tells them to do it, and that's what the injunction is. And so we don't collaborate with the police or with campus safety. We have pretty violent histories with them. They have been brutalizing folks who have been protesting in the city for months. Uh,
What happened?
yeah, so
Yeah.
there are many instances of the Toronto Police Services brutalizing just protesters citywide, but also at the University of Toronto when we did the Simcoe Hall occupation in Mayor Gertler's outside Mayor Gertler's office. We had instances of campus security, sexually harassing protesters. Switching the lights on and off in the middle of the night, not allowing them to open the windows for like the circulation of air, for ventilation rather. And so we have a pretty hostile relationship with them. And so instead, we have our own defense mechanisms. We have our own, marshals and police liaisons and scouts and runners, and we try to keep us safe, with community instead of relying on forces that have previously harmed us. But yes, they are totally on site and they are surveilling us. Earlier this month, UofT put cameras outside the encampment facing inside. They had antennas outside listening to conversations. They had a night vision camera, a video camera, just one that like took pictures. And we know that they have been keeping an eye on us, probably to build their injunction case.
So we're being
Um,
surveyed right now, in a
yeah,
way.
totally, totally, definitely.
Wow, the little things that they would. So they're doing. So there's hidden cameras. There's these sensors. They just place in here.
Yeah, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
campus security, also just circling back to that,
Mm-hmm.
Steve, who's like one of the campus security like managers, I think, he literally told us that we should expect arrests and door knocks after this encampment. And so he's threatened us with Toronto Police Service arresting members of the protest, which is a really scary threat for students, staff, and faculty. And to tell us to expect door knocks, that is an intimidation tactic. And so that's another example of campus security and our relationship with
Wow.
them.
Wow. It's just simply the fact that they throw these things out to you.
Yeah.
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 The type of fear they want to instill into your
That's what
mind.
it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Gets you guys to back down.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Legally, do they have merit in doing that? Any of that things?
I mean, right now there is a court order that's in the like the injunction, and so the hearing will be on the 19th or 20th when decisions will be made in regards to, asking us to clear out versus not. And so we still have yet to see how that goes. But these intimidation tactics, I think, do more harm than good. They are harmful, and so yeah, we don't think that they're necessary, and we think that it's wrong for campus security to tell students to expect to be arrested. We know what police brutality looks like, and that's a really, really, horrible threat to put out.
Wow. So sometimes it doesn't come to you. It's not the physical violence. It's the cold intimidations that they
Yes,
throw to you
yes,
and make you wanting to expect they want you to essentially want this place to be filled with fear.
yes,
Okay.
yeah. They want us gone.
Wow.
Yeah,
It's very manipulative.
yeah. Only if they cared enough about the genocide in Gaza. Only if they cared this much about the fact that there are 40,000 people who have been murdered in Gaza, maybe they would, do the right thing. But it seems like what they care about more is their grass and convocation coming up.
Yeah, speaking of University of Toronto, I heard they refused any publications. That's officially with the school to do any sort of documentation, interview, any sort of process with you guys.
Oh yeah, so I think you're referring to Mayor Gertler meeting with us, which yeah, he hasn't met with us, and in fact, when we had a meeting scheduled with them, which was a negotiating meeting, they had already scheduled a press conference ahead of time before the meeting even started, and so we know that they don't always approach the negotiating table to actually hear us out, but we have our own like folks inside who have been documenting the encampment, who have been documenting how peaceful it is, how we have children who come and visit during the day. This is not a hateful environment. This is, the People's Circle for Palestine. We have an open door policy. This is not exclusive to campers. We let outsiders in as long as they won't hurt us or harm us. Everybody's welcome here. And I think it's important to mention that even the fencing around the encampment, we did not put the fencing up. UofT did. And so, if anything, we have made the grass accessible to students because it wasn't accessible to begin.
Wow. So they would hold press conferences on their
Yeah.
own, and then they want to speak to you, be like, "Hey, I already told you," but they were trying to cut different things throughout.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
playing two sides.
totally. So Mayor Gertler, the president, he has not attended one negotiating meeting. He has spoken to the press, he's spoken to the parliament, he's spoken to the radio, he's never spoken to us. And so, yeah, it's really concerning that instead of engaging in conversation with their own students, staff, and faculty, they're going to go address the media, um, President Gertler specifically. But yeah, you're right. They have not. President Gertler has not spoken to us not once.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's not being known.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And regarding media, as is there how are you guys handling media right now? Is there any news outlet that try to reach out to you guys, trying to speak this? How are things being covered right now? Either commercially, I suppose, locally, globally, or personally through social media? What's been
Yeah.
happening on that side?
Yeah, so we have an Instagram account at OccupyUofT. So we do put a lot of our messaging out there, updates, things like that. But we do have media coverage. We hold press conferences when necessary. But we also have like outlets like CBC, City News, CTV, Global News. They do come here pretty often. So more like, like the big media companies. But then we also have freelancers and folks who write op-eds and writers who come here and try to, get on the record what's going on.
Hmm. And do they report accurately, or they just do they interview people and stuff like that?
Yeah, it totally
Mhm.
depends.
Okay.
I think that we have been framed historically as like a violent people, as threatening. The questions aren't always fair, but But
Why
that
do
is
they do that? Why do they put it? Is there any basis to any of these claims that they're trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, anti-Palestinian racism is something that we have been socialized into, and I think that triggering that in people and falling back on that is a tactic that has been used. You know, I wish I knew why they do it. I wish that we would, be given a fair, space and coverage more often. But that's just the way that things are, and their interests are obviously aligned with the state's interests and the institution's interests. But it's not always. Sometimes we do get pretty fair coverage as well, and it's important to mention that because I think that coverage and media coverage should be fair and should listen to the voices of.
Course, of course. And and how okay, one thing I think we also wanted to mention is that there have been protests all over the city.
Yeah,
Yes. And is that something that is related to you guys? Or
yeah,
what are
totally.
things like in terms of these protests? Are you, are we, is any effect? I noticed when we were just coming here today to film this episode that there were outside the government building, there were protests.
Yeah,
Hmm.
totally.
Hmm.
So even this encampment is in response to a mass mobilization and a call from people on ground in Palestine, but also like these encampments have been taking place across the U.S., across Canada, citywide. Yes, there have been protests. There has been pressure on the state. This encampment is specifically applying pressure on the university because we have to all leverage our positionality and how we relate to institutions. And so, as a student, my relationship with UofT as an institution is different than my relationship with the state. And so it is important to apply pressure on both. But as a student, the university specifically, it's such an intimate relation that students and the institution have, the university have, that we are applying pressure on both ends.
Hmm. So it's for different purposes essentially.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
totally. Yeah.
okay, then how are things on the government side? That's something you've been paying attention to?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously not been good enough. Obviously, Canada has also been complicit in the ongoing genocide, and they continue to extend support and solidarity to Israel, which makes no sense because they are the ones who are invoking this genocide, against the Palestinian people. And so there's a lot of anger and frustration on both ends. But but yeah, that is why we are applying pressure on both.
Well, what do you think their pressure would be?
On the state,
Yeah.
yeah, to listen to its people, to actually reflect the interests of what the people are asking for. People have been mobilizing in the thousands for months on end, and it still seems like we're not getting through to the government. Slowly but surely, they are moving toward things like calling for a ceasefire. But sometimes even that is just like words that they are using to appease people. And so we hope for material change and for material pressure so that we can actually see a difference.
And they are doing that because you think it's purely out of interest, out of their own like state agenda, in essence?
Yeah,
Governments?
there has been so much pressure
Uh-huh.
that we have
Mhm.
applied on the state with mass mobilizations, but then also with things like writing letters to MPs and writing letters to like government officials across the board. And so they're obviously seeing that the people are angry, and definitely the pressure has been successful in pushing for some movement there, but it
Okay.
still isn't good enough.
Okay. Okay. And yeah, I think that moves on to moving forward. Moving
Yeah.
forward, um, what are your plans, organization, just for yourselves? Do you guys plan to be here? What do you guys see?
Yeah, so
Hmm.
we are focusing on the negotiation. We are really hoping for our demands to be met. We are steadfast in our demands, and so we don't intend to leave until they are met on campus.
So this is the third negotiation that you guys are trying to establish here.
Yeah, so we are
Hmm.
continuing to negotiate with them in good
Hmm.
faith,
Okay.
regardless of the injunction. We are not here, we're not waiting for the police to come and raid us. We don't want to wait here until the injunction hearing. We want our demands to be met. As soon as they are, that's a peaceful resolution, and we will leave. But until they are met, we will not be leaving. We don't want slow bureaucratic procedures and committees. We want commitments. And as long as those commitments are aligned with our calls and our demands, that's all we want. And so that is where we're directing our energy going forward. This injunction has definitely diverted some of our energy and our labor, which is unfortunate. But we will continue to mobilize and continue to apply pressure to the best of our abilities so that our demands can be met.
Okay. So still, but so really until you want to just wait here to see how collaborative the university have been. And from what we have just talked about so far, the university has been rather just trying to be diplomatic,
Yeah.
bureaucrat, at the same time very bureaucratic. They were trying to
Yeah.
delay as long as they can, and at the same time trying to resolve this in their own maybe legal political power that they have.
Yeah,
Hmm.
totally. We're asking for neutrality. We're saying, hey, be fair. Why are your investments only reflecting the interests of one side? What about the people who are suffering? Why aren't you listening to your Palestinian students, your Palestinian staff, faculty, and allies alike? We are calling for neutrality, and we are doing something that we have almost been pushed into doing because the university has failed to meet its legal and moral and ethical obligations to divest and to be neutral in this situation. Although even being neutral is not enough, that is just the beginning, and we must call for it.
Because also one thing is that I heard there's a ceasefire proposal that's been happening, that Israeli has offered to Hamas, and President Biden is urging very urging to for Hamas to take that peace offer. Do you know much about that? Like, what is that about? First
We
of all.
know that Netanyahu, so is the Israeli leaders and government officials, they have made it very clear that even if the hostages are released or whatever, they will continue to bomb and annihilate Gaza. On October 9th and 10th, there was, the resistance did say that they would return the hostages as long as they don't enter the Gaza Strip. And the Israeli, spokespeople, or rather officials, denied this. And so we know that, they intend to continue invoking this genocide upon the Palestinian people. But regardless of that, it is important to make clear that this encampment is not about what Hamas or what any resistance group can or cannot do in response to 76 years of occupation. Instead, it is about neutrality. Instead, it is about calling the university to not invest in genocidal companies that are invoking horror and pain and violence upon its students, staff, and faculty and their family members.
I see. And would that impact if there's any ceasefire, or if there's any change in what in status quo? Would that impact the encampment?
Yeah, I mean that we would still, call on the university to still cut ties with weapons manufacturing companies. Our tuition money should not be going toward companies that uphold and maintain violence, especially in such a gruesome way as we can see with the genocide, the worst, case of famine again that we have seen in recent times. And so we would continue to push on these demands regardless, but we are also totally calling for an end to the violence and an end to the pain. Because enough is enough, and how many Palestinians need to die before the university decides that it is time to actually divest. They have divested from fossil fuels in the past. They have divested from South African apartheid. UofT's president, Mara Gertler, actually decided to unilaterally divest from fossil fuels in 2021, I believe. And so we know that we don't need slow bureaucratic procedures and committees. We know that he can just decide unilaterally to divest, and that's it. And UofT will divest. And so we're saying that divest now, disclose now. We don't want long committees that will lead to the presidential veto coming through and leading to no change actually taking place. We want change now. And I think that as students and staff and faculty and community members, we have every right to protest and to call the university to do this.
And as the university president, he has the power
Yeah.
individually.
Yeah, he's done it before.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
and another reason that we're pushing back against their proposals for long committees and things like that is because in 2016, when students called for UofT to divest from fossil fuels, they presented an ad hoc committee that the president staffed.
What
And
is an ad hoc committee?
yeah, it's a
Uh,
committee that the university's president, office of the president, puts together of people that then make a recommendation. So students said, "Hey, divest from fossil fuels." The university said, "Okay, we'll create a committee who will make a recommendation," and then the president decides yes or no to the recommendation. And the president has a veto, and so he can just say no to the recommendation. And at the end of the campaign, what the students asked for in the first time just gets denied. And so we've seen him invoke this presidential veto in the past, where he said no to the fossil fuel divestment recommendation. And then 6 years later, he eventually said yes. But the problem is that we don't have 6 years. There is an ongoing genocide and people are dying now. And this presidential veto has proven to be problematic in the past in getting any change. And so we are asking for them to just make the decision to divest now without slow bureaucratic slowdowns and procedures that lead to no impact and no change.
and do you guys know what is he looking for? Like, what does he want really? Like, why is he hesitating this decision? What are the things that he might be considering?
Yeah, so there's
Yeah.
definitely a lot of pressure from Zionists and potentially donors. That being said, divestment again, like I said, is neutrality, and he can do it, and he can call for it, and so that is why we are here.
What is the worst case scenario that they're afraid of?
Yeah, I don't really know myself. It is a very very realistic call, and it's a very like it's a genuine and legitimate call. And so we don't understand why these slowdowns are still taking place, why our demands still have not been met. We have been here for a month now. Um, but but it doesn't really matter what those reasons are, because objectively this is something that they should do. They are obligated legally and morally to do it, and they are failing to meet their legal obligations. And so we as students now have to be put in this position to make them, to pressure them to do it.
Mhm. And how about what about life here? Like you guys, I know you guys are living in tents.
Yeah.
I see this community set up that there's a kitchen,
Yeah.
that there's everybody's washing the dishes.
Yeah.
Last time I was here, it was raining, so
Yeah.
people were putting things away, and there was a fire going bonfire sometimes.
Yeah,
It seems like
totally.
there's a really nice, beautiful community you guys are building up.
Yeah, so we have an indigenous sacred fire at the back, which is keeping us safe. We have, yeah, we have like different like parts of the camp. We have many care tents. We have a spiritual care tent with chaplains. We have, social work students and peer support workers who extend care and support and knowledge, to help folks through this, through this protest. Yes, we sleep in tents, which is not ideal, but it's a protest, and that's something that we're willing to do. We are putting a lot on the whole, our lives on hold, work and friends and family, and we've put everything on hold to be here because of how serious the situation is. This is not a summer camp; it's a protest, and we are pretty, serious about being here. And I think that we're all grounded in the reasons why we are here. We understand how bad the situation on ground in Palestine is. There's an ongoing genocide, and this is just something that we're willing to do
Mm.
for our demands to be met.
Yes. And here are students, community workers, faculty members,
Yeah, many.
very, culturally very diverse individuals, and also occupationally.
Yeah,
So there's a lot of different individuals, like people here from all walks of life and background.
yeah,
That's what's been
totally,
happening. Yeah.
totally, totally.
Yeah, because we see here now this flower shop I see, and the
Yeah.
library.
Yeah, we
This
have a
is very,
library.
very
Yes.
well done here.
Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's taken a month, but we're here
Mhm.
now, and we're
Mhm.
only growing, and momentum is
Mhm.
only building.
Yeah.
Um,
Have you guys thought about that, the various scenarios?
mhm.
Are you, is it an ultimatum right now that you guys are looking to achieve? And if not, are there alternatives you guys are considering, or perhaps something else?
Yeah, so we've
Mhm.
had a few back and forths with the offer.
Mhm.
UofT actually presented an ultimatum to us. They presented, their first offer, which they framed as their final offer. And as an institution that bargains with unions on campus all the time, they know that the first written offer rather, cannot be the final offer. And so our counter offer was then a little bit, we tweaked it a little bit in terms of cutting academic ties. For example, we pinpointed two specific institutions, the Hebrew University and Technion. And so, we have also made it a little bit more like actionable and specific so that they can meet our demands right away. That being said, given how basic our demands are and how they are grounded in us literally holding the institution accountable to law, we will hold them and we will remain steadfast in them as they are.
Understood. Understood. So that's something that moving forward might happen,
Yeah,
and all that stuff. And this is beautiful. It's a beautiful community you guys built up. But I do understand the seriousness of it
yeah,
and the things that's been happening. But one thing that really has amazed me is how that, it must be very stressful for all the community management that's been, you got yourself as one of the main organizers, and definitely your fellows, to have constantly so many trouble to worry about.
yeah,
Is one thing is just, regard of that, it just shows the power of love, it shows humanity. It shows a lot of, we see kids playing soccers, like everybody almost all. So I saw this quote. I was, to my friend, we're discussing about the issues that whatever little we can help, we're looking to help. And you guys have been built up something so huge, with such a strong momentum that's been going on, and still the positivity that even I see yourself with
oh,
this,
thanks, yeah,
and must be going through a lot at the same time, just to be able to have the strength to carry on, and also the power. That's very powerful, and that's more powerful than any political entities can threaten you. I
yeah.
want to say that.
Thank you so much for saying that.
Yeah.
And I think that we're all here for the same reasons. We're here because we are just horrified and angry and sad and frustrated at, the state of the world right now, and the situation in Palestine. And that's what keeps us going. They won't tire us out. We will remain here for as long as we need to. And I think that that's where our strength is. Our strength is in community, in the people, and the people coming together, and numbers, because we know that we have the numbers, and we know that this is what the people have been calling for such a long time. And so we will remain to be here until they are met. And I really appreciate your words as well, and for you
Yeah,
coming out.
thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Always an honor. But a couple before we wrap this up, I wanted to ask two things.
Yeah.
One thing is that for students that are not know the situation,
Mhm.
I do hear things in there, and especially students that might be further away from the community, might be further away from the conflict, that they are worried about their graduation. Is that something you want? Is there anything you guys would like to say to them to get them to understand the situation, or just to address your fellow students?
Of course, yeah. And so even like the fencing around King's College Circle, around this encampment, this fencing has been here years in the past. The only and during convocation when I graduated, I'm in my master's now, but I did my undergrad here as well. We had the fencing around King's College Circle during my grad, and grad went on as usual. And so convocation hall is open, and people can still graduate. The only difference this year is that the fencing has Palestine flags on it, and that should not be a deterrent. If that is a deterrent, if that makes people feel uncomfortable, they should ask themselves why. A flag makes them feel uncomfortable. And this is also a very serious situation. And I think that centering on the gravity of the situation at hand may make it make sense. We are here because it has been 76 years late, and we are still pushing for divestment. There's an ongoing genocide. And that should make people feel furious, and want to extend solidarity to us for doing something that we are only doing because UFT has failed to meet its own obligations legally and morally and ethically. And so that is what I would say. Graduation will continue as usual, and our taking up of the space should not come in the way of that.
One last thing I ask all my guests before we wrap this up is that any message for the future, whether it be 10 years, 5 years, couple months,
Yeah.
anything you'd like to say to the future community that might be watching this video.
Yeah, just
Hmm.
like to always place people over profit. We must, center our humanity in everything that we do, in our relations with one another. We're human beings first. We can't let these fake rules and borders and things divide us. We have the same skin, the same flesh, the same blood, and we are stronger together. And we are more similar and more united than we are socialized to think, that we are. And so, just to center on the similarity and the similarities that we share, I think is the best thing that we can do, and to extend grace and empathy and care to each other, to engage in conversation in good faith, to understand each other's perspectives and opinions instead of you know uh, falling back onto like tropes or narratives that are harmful or hateful. um but yeah, like, I'm so grateful for the solidarity that the community has extended to us, and I hope that we can only build momentum so that everybody in this world is free, and nobody has to live under occupation, and nobody has to deal with a genocide, and nobody has to be murdered for where they are born. And so I just hope we as a peoples can do better because right now is a really difficult time. But I'm certain that with time, hopefully things get better, and that we all unite, hopefully.
Thank you. And lastly, where can we find you guys? Where can we find more about everything that's going on? You want to share it with the
Yeah,
audience? Mhm.
at OccupyUofT on Instagram and on Twitter.
Okay, and
Yeah.
that's it. Anything else?
No, thank you
YouTube.
so much for coming out. I
Hmm.
can give you a tour after.
Sure. Yeah, I'll be an
Yeah,
honor. Yeah.
awesome.
All right.
And beyond that, this was
Hmm.
this was a really great conversation. And if
Thank you. Thank
people
you.
have
Really
questions,
acknowledged.
yeah, and if
Hmm.
people have questions or are looking to learn more about the situation, like, there are so many resources online, and I really urge people to do it as well, because I understand that this is new to many people. But it's important for us to do our best and to be knowledgeable about what the situation is, and how our institutions and our state is complicit in the violence and in the war, and the genocide more specifically.
Hmm. All right. There you have it, everyone. Thank you. Thank
Thank you
you.
so much for your
Thank
time.
you, guys. See ya.
Awesome. Great.